All right, we are live. We are back. Matt, before we jump into today's episode, I got to ask, do you know what EDI is? Are you familiar with what?
I'm familiar, but could you tell me more about it?
Okay, so before we jump in, today's episode is brought to you by my friends, BitFreighter. They're the preferred EDI partner here over at the Freight Coach. The guys at BitFreighter are on a mission to connect the logistics industry with a flat fee for unlimited EDI messaging. Carriers and owner-operators alike, you are costing yourself business by not having a digital option to accept tenders from your customers. With the Load Accept platform, EDI is no longer an expensive and unattainable option for companies who may not have a legacy TMS to utilize for their day-to-day operations. Load Accept levels the playing field for your organization and makes you EDI compliant with your customers through automation. If your customers are requiring you to have EDI capabilities, you now have a seamless and effective tool to utilize in Load Accept. If you're ready to learn more, visit www.bitfreighter.com to request a Load Accept demo today. Just do me a favor and let them know that the Freight Coach sent you. And we are here. EDI, man, honestly, it's one of those tools that as a broker and a carrier alike, you need to have an EDI option for you to utilize. And like a lot of stuff in this industry, Matt, as you know, the legacy providers generally just name a price, and people have just been paying it for a very long time. And they have an affordable and seamless option for people to level the playing field. And that's what it's all about here, man. Like at what we're doing here with all of our content, I just want to level the playing field. I want to help that little guy, that mom and pop carrier and broker that's out there, and let them know that there are tools that aren't there to essentially drain their bank account every single month. And it levels it, like it equals it. Because at the end of the day, as you know, Matt and Freight, we're all offering the same service, just a different logo.
Absolutely, man. The future is ACES. It's about autonomous, connected, electric, and shared. And this connecting systems and that technology is absolutely critical for the future of our industry. No question about that.
Absolutely. So who are you? The armchair attorney? Matt Leffler, aka the armchair attorney.
From time to time.
From time to time. You're like the Austin Powers of trucking. All right. You're an international man of mystery. You're literally in everything. John Radvansky, what's going on, man? He's watching over on YouTube. Hey, anybody who's out there watching today, drop your comments and questions in there, and we'll get to them as we answer it. Like I just mentioned, I have my friend Matt Leffler here today, aka the armchair attorney. We're here to talk about kind of like what's the equipment outlook in 2022, and then we're going to dive into this potentially or could be perceived outlandish sentence that was handed down out there in Colorado. So we're going to kind of break it in. So Matt, who are you, man? Outside of the international man of mystery, what are you all about?
First of all, I love John Radvansky. Huge fan. Thank you for watching. Thank you for having me on, Chris. A couple of quick housekeeping matters. So we're going to talk about some legal things as an armchair attorney. Let me be very, very specific. Nothing that I give today or talk about is intended for an attorney-client relationship. I am not offering legal advice. It is for purely entertainment purposes only. Do not take legal advice from a television show. The second piece of housekeeping is today is my wife's birthday. Holly Marie Leffler. She is watching. Happy birthday, Holly.
Happy birthday, Holly.
I gave her the greatest gift I could give, 1 hour away from me. And so she has that now, though she is watching. So I respect that very much. So my background, I'm a maintenance guy. I'm a supply chain guy. I love to understand the trends and the forces that shape our industry. As a lawyer, I love to understand problems and figure out ways we can find solutions. So if we're talking about equipment, we're only talking about problems right now. Yeah. So the outlook for 2022 is very similar to what we've experienced in 2021. The story of manufacturing, whether it's heavy duty equipment or anything else, is the story of outsourcing and offshoring, and then having a more diversified supply chain. So just like you have shortages of chips that make it slow for truck manufacturers to make things, we have shortages of everything. Yeah. Most manufacturers are assemblers of other people's things. And so any single bottleneck in any single component stops production. Things become red tagged, put to the side, waiting for the parts. Just like the aftermarket shops that I used to run, we're waiting on parts. We're waiting on parts.
I think like this is just me being an optimist. What I'm more excited about is I want people to bring manufacturing back here. I think this situation is going to force people to think, all right, when we're talking about delays, we're talking about, how many customers are just going to be fine with waiting and waiting and waiting? What can we do to manufacture back here? What can we do to bring a lot of this offshore issues, bring them back here in the supply chain? Because, again, last time I checked, if it's made in America, you don't have to import it. It doesn't have to go through a port or anything like that. But I want to see alternatives to this because, again, we're so enthralled with, well, this is just the way we've always done it. Like, we can't do anything. But like, at the end of the day, man, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, as an American, we're very innovative. We're very smart. We can figure this out. We just got to think outside the box.
The fundamental problem I feel is we've misunderstood what a supply chain is supposed to do. A
Yes.
supply chain is not a thing to reduce cost. It can be in some circumstances, but a supply chain exists to grow a business, to grow. And if you do not have a supply chain geared to growth, you have a supply chain that is built to be very, very lean. I'm going to go in the way back machine. We're talking about manufacturing 40, 50 years ago. When you had a manufacturer, their component suppliers were their neighbors all around them. You'd bring from one factory to the next factory, but then it became cheaper to do it somewhere else. And it became so much cheaper to make something half a world away, put it on a boat, bring it to a port, throw it on a rail cart, and then bring it to the manufacturer with a truck. This is what has made our supply chain less resilient. Even further, the idea of just-in-time fulfillment. Look, I ran a shop. I had inventory. My goal was to not have inventory. I would rather have my supplier have the inventory. And then I would call them and say, can you bring that to me? But low inventories mean you don't have what you need when you need it. Our supply chain was so efficient. And efficiency means it works really well when everything's perfect.
Yes.
When it's not, this is what happens. You can't make what you need. And so you have to take what you have and use it better.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know where you come up with some of this stuff, Matt, but that's very well said. You know, like
the story of our manufacturers is the story of Kellogg's. You see workers that are striking because they don't like the outcome that they're given, the deal they're offered. What ends up happening is you find ways to reduce labor costs. And that means outsourcing, offshoring, and making your supply chain less resilient. You look back at I love military history, but you look back at the militaries of thousands of years ago, they would have one or two decisive battles, and that was it. One punch in the mouth and you were done. But as the growth of logistics happened, the supply chains, you could take more than one punch. You could take a battering. Our supply chain is so efficient that it can't take these punches in the mouth. Now, we're doing well. The stuff coming out of the ports is higher than it's ever been. And we know that there are solutions going forward. But this is what happens when you focus on reducing costs as opposed to growing your supply chain.
Yeah. Here's my honest take on a lot of this, Matt. I think the next wave of great businesses and entrepreneurs and everything else that are coming in are going to be the ones who find the way to manufacture it here in America. And I think there's going to be a very big push here over the next 5 to 10 years of made in America goods. I think a lot of people out there, because they're looking at it, man, like when you walk into, I'm not going to go into the political aspect of walking into a store and, bare shelves and all that other stuff. But I think that this is an opportunity, and that's what a lot of us need to start looking at. It's just like my time as a broker. When there was a lot of issues going on, was I just going to succumb to the issue itself? Or was I going to say, wait a second, this is an opportunity for me to steal market share from all of my competitors? Because if all of my competitors are telling my customer, hey, the market's tight, capacity, this and that. Well, wait a second, let me double down and find the solution for it. And then my 10 truckloads in a day goes to 100 truckloads in a day because I solved the problem. And that's what I see on the more widespread manufacturing, everything else there, the processed goods, like all of that stuff. The ones who finally just buckle down and say, all right, how can we manufacture it here? That label made in America is going to mean 10 times more over the next 5 years, in my opinion, than it has over the last 15 years.
I couldn't agree with you more. One of the things that we think about with products, generally speaking, is we kind of forget that the product is inextricably linked to the logistics that gives it to you. The product and the supply chain are inseparable. This is what Amazon learned. Amazon realized that if they didn't control their supply chain, that meant someone else did. So we saw Central Freight Lines begin winding down, a tragic event with a historically amazing carrier. 30% of their revenue was Amazon. And Amazon said, we can do that better than you. Thank you for
Correct.
doing it for us. So
Yeah.
they understood that if you own the supply chain, you own that experience for the customer. And the
Yeah.
product, I mean, I would love to have more stuff made in America, whether that's through high-speed production facilities or domestic manufacturing. The chance of that economic change is probably coming. Automation will continue to reduce the cost of
Yeah.
labor, but we are a global supply chain. You think
Correct.
of a trailer manufacturer like the folks at Great Dane or Manac. They are amazing institutions, but they're just as bound by all the components that come from thousands of places across the world. And to bring that back domestically is a very long-term type of solution. We
Yeah.
still have to run against all of the market trends that say it is still more affordable to have it made somewhere else.
Yeah. No, I mean, those are all good points, Matt. Like, again, it's, my only counter to all of that is, like I said, is I think that there's going that reliance and that label of made in America, they're going to figure it out. We're going to, like you're talking about with automation and manufacturing and everything else. If there's a way for a company like Amazon to do it here, they're going to do it here. They will do it
Absolutely.
wherever it is most cost effective. And, it's like a lot of these large enterprise distribution centers and everything else that are out there. If this is, like when you're talking about all the hiccups that are at the port, now their shelves, their inventory levels are going low, because it's like the biggest farce that's out there is that a company like Costco doesn't have inventory. They have inventory. You know what I mean? Like, but to me, it's what are they going to do in the next 6 months? How are they going to have to change their ways to ensure that their inventory levels don't fall? And I think a lot of it is a lot of companies are going to be forced. I understand from a cost perspective that it might be cheaper today, but when you start factoring in time lost of everything sitting out there, I mean, the port of LA still has, it's ironic how that's not talked about anymore. There's still over 100 ships sitting out there. There's still a lot of companies that are bound by that. It's going to get to a point where, like, we have the infrastructure, we have the freeway system, we have the rail system, we have the transit system here in the United States. I think companies are going to find a way to do it here, and it might be more automation to lower the cost, because again, cost of labor is always going to be a part of this. And I'm not looking to sit here and say, oh, take away our jobs or anything like that. But at the same time, as a business, you're going to automate what you can. But I am a firm believer that the human element, that human touch, is always going to be a part of it. That handwritten note, like there's companies out there that I buy from. I got to say this right now. First Form, I buy all of my supplements from them. I literally get a handwritten note from the person who packed my order. I will buy from that company for those little things. They're more expensive than other people that are out there in that space, but I will always buy from them because of that feeling that I get.
Yeah, well, the thing you kind of outlined, the port of Long Beach with those 100 boats sitting off the coast. There's only a handful of ports on the West Coast that can receive the large container
Yeah.
ships. So what Amazon, like other carriers, have realized is, well, there's ports with less congestion. We can do smaller boats, go through the Panama Canal, and then we're in Houston or Savannah or New Jersey, and
Yep.
now you have a supply chain that's able to be much more proactive in getting things moved. Now, more small boats is not the answer to the
Yeah.
problem of the transportation business. But you raised a good point on the cost of trucking. I mean, very few people kind of realize what is the most expensive part of transportation. In trucking, it's fuel. The
Yes.
second most expensive thing is labor. The third most is the asset. And then you get down to maintenance and insurance and other things. But these are the big things that are driving these massive trends we talk about, this
Yeah.
autonomous systems, these connected systems, electric and shared. This is the path of what we're going to see the next 5 or 10 years. And to your point about the products we're buying, this is kind of our fault too as consumers. As consumers, we're like,
Yeah.
we want it now. We want it faster. We want everything in the world now. And
Yes.
that mentality must be broken. This is
Yeah.
why I'll just plug a company like Etsy. Etsy's not trying to sell you on speed and cost. They're selling you on a experience.
Yeah.
And that is where companies will be most benefited, when they focus on how can they talk to a customer in a way that's not about speed and price. If
Yeah.
that's the only thing you're selling, all we will see is increases of these types of problems.
Matt, we're the same age. Do you think that experience means more to us than somebody that's younger, though? Because, like, there's a shoe company out there, Allen Edmonds Shoes. I love going into the store. Very personable. It makes this small town hillbilly from Wisconsin feel feel important when I'm in there, the experience that comes along with it. Do you think that experience is dying out as a whole, or does that still mean enough to a lot of people where those businesses need to think about that still? When my customers are in my store, how do I keep them in my store and never have them look at somebody else? Like the shoe company that I brought up, they're a lot more expensive than a lot of other shoe companies, but it's the feeling that I get when I go in there. It's like they know my size. They have everything saved, every detail about my foot. Some people, they might like that, but every detail about my foot is in their store. And when I walk in, they know exactly what shoes to bring me.
I'm a retailer at heart. I first learned about peak season when I was working at KB Toys. And
Yeah.
we would get, instead of getting 1 truck a week, we got 3 or 4 trucks a week. So that experience of buying in person is incredibly important. I don't know if it will last. We have gotten to a generation where people want instant gratification. I look at my children. My youngest son had a birthday yesterday and he turned
Yeah.
6, and my oldest will be turning 9 on the January 2nd. And they don't know what it's like to be bored. You and I know what it's like to be bored. We had that time.
No,
What
I
I
didn't.
hope.
My dad always said, pick up a fucking hose. Go, you're bored? Here's a shovel.
Go outside and do something. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, what I would advise everyone who's watching, all the viewers you have, is if you can spend local, spend local. Just
Yeah.
try it. Just try it. Because that is the way that you're going to counteract some of these trends and forces that shape the world. Because if you're only going after the lowest cost good, you're not going to have an experience that gets you loyal to that product.
Yeah.
And that is what these brands really want to have, is that personalized experience. So the analogy you gave with the shoe store, I'm the same way with where I want to get groceries or I want to get clothing. Yeah. I don't want to just buy something on the internet, have it delivered and shipped back. But Amazon makes it easy. And that's the challenge. We as a generation are looking for, like water flowing, the path of least resistance.
I know. I feel you. We could go on and on about this all day, but I want to talk about the hottest headline in the news right now in our industry, because this driver, 110-year sentence. Yeah. And there's a lot of people who are trying to pull some parallels from other cases, but at the end of the day, there's not one that I found in my research that is literally verbatim the exact same. There's a lot of other instances where somebody negligence hit and killed them, but not in this particular instance. And the video, like, because I saw the video, like somebody has the video of the truck going down the hill. Mm-hmm. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. And again, before we talk about any of this stuff, like Matt said, I'm not a lawyer. This is not legal advice at all. I'm not looking to get sued. I'm just a dude with a microphone who wants to talk about this stuff. None of this is legal advice in any way, shape, or form at all. So one of the most troubling things, and again, the video that I saw, it didn't look like he even tapped his brakes. And again, that was only a small portion of the downslope that it was. But if your brakes are truly shot, correct me if I'm wrong, you come from maintenance, I want to ask you, is your brake light still activated if you're trying to slam on your brakes, right?
Yeah, so there's a lot we're going to talk about with this case. There's a lot. Yes. What I'd like to do is kind of start off with some of the facts. So when, as a lawyer, you follow the law and the facts, and this case is exceptional. And what I mean by exceptional is that it is an exception. That's the only reason all of us know about it and talk about it. Yeah. In criminal circumstances, 90 to 95% of those are pled out. They never see a jury. Yeah. They never see a jury. So we are seeing a jury verdict with sentencing that puts a person in prison for 110 years. So I did a little bit of research because that's what lawyers like to do. Correct. And I kind of want to walk through a few things, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, I would love it. Do you have the initial plea agreement? Because the information that I saw, the driver wanted a traffic ticket.
Yes. That is what anecdotally we understand. Correct. Is that in this circumstance, the defendant was sought after for a plea agreement. We do not know any of the context of the plea. Yep. Those are all confidential, generally not discussed. But when I first read this, I realized that this was an injustice. And it's not for the reasons we think.
Yes.
When the judge put the sentence in place, even he said, quote, if I had discretion, if I had the choice, this would not be my sentence. this would not be the sentence he put in place.
Yeah.
What we are looking at is a case that is highlighting what we have seen in all criminal matters across all states about mandatory minimum sentences, sentences that are served consecutively versus concurrently. Just to be clear, we're talking about what Colorado defines as crimes of violence.
Yeah.
Now, I'll tell you, vehicular homicide is not a crime of violence under Colorado law.
Okay.
The law that talks about the crime of violence is these attempted first-degree assault and the assault charges. So here's the story.
Yeah.
23-year-old truck driver is going down a mountain with a loaded piece of equipment. Now, these are probably 80,000 pounds of the whole system together. You don't use your brakes going down a mountain. You use an engine brake.
Correct.
Your brakes will overheat. They will not function the way that you want. So the first question we have about this defendant, and his name is Rogel Lazaro Aguilar Menderos, 23 years old, came from Cuba when he was 19 years old, never had a criminal violation his entire life, didn't have any drugs or alcohol in his system. I asked the question, and I think we'll probably find this out as civil litigation proceeds. Who trained this truck driver?
Yep.
How long does it take to get a CDL? 3 weeks? 6 weeks?
Yeah. In a truck driving school, probably, I would say no more than 5 weeks. 5 weeks of training.
We expect truck drivers to operate that motor vehicle as if they were airline pilots.
Correct.
With that same level of responsibility and integrity. And yet generally they're compensated like retail workers. Now, the thing in this case, here are the facts. So he drove this truck going 85 miles an hour down the mountain. He had an opportunity to get off one of those ramps. Now, when he was arrested, he had trouble communicating in English. He had to have an interpreter help him. One of the things about this trucking company, and I want to spend some time in a moment talking about Castellano 03 Trucking LLC. This is his employer at the time.
Correct.
The day after the accident, they dissolved. The day after they dissolved. That same day, they made a new trucking company. That new trucking company is called Volt Trucking LLC, all out of Texas, same ownership team.
Do you have their MC number that you can put out there right now to anybody who's watching? Did you get their MC?
I have it in other files. Okay. I can share it with you. You can post this when you put more stuff out there. Here's the thing. He doesn't go off the ramp. He drives onto the shoulder. But there's another truck.
The ramp is there. It's plural. Ramp.
Yeah, ramp. So you went through. Yeah, absolutely.
There was multiple. It's not just one that he missed.
And he also went to the shoulder and saw another truck accident and went back into the road. And this is when he had this massive pileup. Now, in this thing, it's a 28-car pileup. This is horrifying. These are the facts of the case. 4 people die. Ultimately, he is sentenced to, we talk about 110 years, but he's convicted of 27 counts. And I'm just going to read the counts he was convicted of. 6 counts of first-degree assault. That carries 10 years apiece, served consecutively. 10 counts of attempted first-degree assault. 5 years each of those, again, served consecutively. 4 counts of vehicular homicide, 4 counts of careless driving, 2 counts of vehicle assault, and 1 count of reckless driving. The only violations, the statutes he breaks that are part of these crimes of violence are the 6 counts of first-degree assault and the 10 counts of attempted first-degree assault. Back in the 1990s, Colorado wanted to get tough on crime.
Yeah.
Oh, we all want to get tough on crime.
Yeah.
And what tough on crime meant in that circumstance was we don't want the jury and we don't want the judge to have the option to sentence somebody. We're going to mandate this is how it works. This is why we're tough on crime.
Mm-hmm.
Mandatory minimums are bad. I don't like them.
Yeah.
I don't like when you take power out of the hands of the jury, especially power out of the hands of the court.
I mean, to me, it's like you're taking it out of the hands, and you're like an elected official is essentially putting that. Again, I'm not a fan of mandates at all. I will let the record clear on across the board at all. This instance in particular, you are legitimately, because again, like that is legitimate. I mean, you're a lawyer. Correct me if I'm wrong. The whole sole purpose of the legal system is in the United States of America is to be tried by a jury of your peers. Correct.
Absolutely.
Then from there, like how many other states are like this that are like Colorado in that event? because it's not common. Like there's only a couple of, like with my research that I did, there's like what, 4?
So I don't know all of the states
Okay.
and what they do for mandatory minimums. The
Okay.
federal system has had mandatory minimums for a while.
Okay.
What I would say is, just as people think about what the mandatory minimum really is probably somebody had some event that happened 40, 50 years ago and said, well, this guy or gal got off with a warning or probation.
Yeah.
Let's never let that happen again. Let's mandate how we're going to proceed with these criminal defendants. Forget about the facts and the law. We're going to mandate exactly how the judge will behave. This is why the judge in this case said, this isn't my sentence.
Yeah.
I don't want this.
Yeah.
This is a life sentence. Now, again, he's not going to prison for homicide. That's not why he's going to prison, because homicide, vehicular homicide, is not a crime of violence. Now,
Yeah.
this is because the legislature drafted the words to make it the way that it is. When you look at these mandatory minimums, what I love about this case, and again, this case is horrifying. The facts are terrible.
Yeah.
But it gets us to understand what lawyers have been talking about for decades. These are unjust laws. Now, Colorado, to their credit, is now going through all of these mandatory sentences they've put in place and saying, maybe we should adjust it. But they're on the misdemeanors now. They haven't gotten to these felonies.
Yeah.
Now, what I'll mention is on December 17th of this year, the prosecutor filed a motion, and they said, under the statute in Colorado, we want the sentence to be reconsidered. Because the judge knows, the prosecutor knows, and the defense knows. Now, I'm going to spend just a brief second to talk about prosecutorial latitude that they get to have. A prosecutor gets to make the decision of what they're going to charge you with.
Yeah.
They know exactly what those outcomes may look like when they charge you. And so for a prosecutor, I'm not speaking about Colorado specifically, but just generally, prosecutors in many states are elected officials. And just like you talk about freight KPIs, key performance indicators, on time, undamaged freight, that's important. When you're a prosecutor, what are your KPIs? Charges and convictions. Charges and convictions. How many people do I charge? How often do I convict them? And so prosecutors have, in some cases, the desire to overcharge or charge as many things as possible, knowing that they might get a plea agreement. So I can imagine the conversation that took place between the prosecutor in this case and the defense counsel. Hey, your guy might go to prison for the rest of his life. We can plead to these things or these things. And the defense counsel, for whatever reason, opted not to. Let's go to the jury and see what happens. Jury trials are a crapshoot. You got to be careful of what you get from these things.
For sure.
And so this
because it's like, I mean, like when it comes down to a jury trial crapshoot, what if 2 of those individuals had a family member that were hit and killed and the person walked? Like that emotion, that element comes into play, like no matter what. And I know that they do a great job. Yeah. I know they do a lot of things in jury selection to kind of weed out a lot of that, but it's not a foolproof plan.
The jurors cried. Some of them did, and talked to the media after this case happened because they were so disturbed by the sentence. Some of the victims of in this horrific accident are also against the sentence. So when this rehearing takes place, and under Colorado statute, they have, I believe, 91 days to make this reconsideration. The victims will be brought in. They will talk. I mean, to your point of jury selection, this is what the legal terminology is called voir dire, where you interview jurors for potential biases and say, well, did you ever have this? What did you do? Can you be unbiased in this case? This is a horrifying accident.
Yeah.
What I'm most concerned about is the liability of the trucking company and the liability of the school that trained this gentleman. The brakes could have failed. I get that. That happens. He might not have been able to read the signs to pull off. Again, we don't know. We'll find that out, I think, in the civil case a little bit more.
You know, and again, though, like in that instance, Matt, we all have to put ourselves in that driver's position. Human element, human error will always come in. You freeze up. If you hit you're going down a mountain. And, you know, in Colorado, where that was, that's not like a little, like it's a pretty steep grade. I understand that the driver, you know, I understand all of this. So, but my thing is you freeze up. you don't know how to react. Your initial thought is, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. I'm going to die. You lose that sense of judgment because, again, back to your initial thing, they are not airline pilots. Okay. They are not sent for months and months of training and then continual training in how to react in the event that there's a brake failure, there's an engine failure, there's something. There's not a checklist for a driver to go down. And again, I understand that the driver needs to be held accountable for their actions. It's to me, it's like you said, the training.
Yeah.
What could the driver have done differently prior to popping it in first gear and going down the mountain? Was there anything the driver could do differently? Again, I don't know. I wasn't there, but we need to look at this case in a way of how can we improve safety overall?
Absolutely.
Now, is there a way that we can actually tell? And again, if anybody has a can drop it in the comments, Matt, maybe from a maintenance perspective, is there a chip or something that can show, yes, the brakes did in fact fail?
So let me just got a couple things here. So let's look at some of the FMCSA data. So this company, we're going to look at Castellano 03 Trucking LLC. Over the past 2 years that's available at the FMCSA website, they have over 30 violations.
Gross negligence. Yes.
And some of these violations include brakes, airlines that are broken, airlines that are chafed, problems with the ability of the drivers to speak English and understand English. As an FMCSA, you must be able to understand signs that are in English in our country. Yes. And again, if you can't, there is training available. Yes. What we have to really focus on, I think, to your point, is if we don't really look at how we train drivers in this country, this will not be the end of it. I mean, yes. Again, this guy was on the shoulder and saw another truck accident and had to pull back on. Truck accidents are not always the fault of the truck driver, but when they get into an accident, they can be catastrophic. And so what I want to really focus on in this case is a couple things. One, I want your viewers to understand that this is not a case about a driver who is evil. This is a man who was probably not trained to handle his equipment, made some incredibly bad decisions. I am not asking for this driver to have his sentence commuted. That's not what we're talking about. Yes. What we're talking about is a sentence that is justified by the facts, supported by the law. And we want to have these small independent companies. Like, again, we talked about Castellano 03 Trucking LLC goes out of business the day after the accident. I wonder what their insurance rates were. I wonder how much insurance they carried for that company.
Or if they did carry like actual insurance.
And then the next day they have a new company, same ownership team. This could happen again. And that Zoom or Volt Trucking, they've already had several DOT violations. So this was in 2019, this happened. So Volt has been operating. It's got 4 truck drivers. You can look them up online. They're having the same problems, same airline issues, same braking issues. So I just want people to kind of step away from this whole thing and say, I'm really glad we learned more about how the law is impacting truck drivers. Because truck drivers are the most important jobs in America. That's how everything is moved. But if you put it out that if you have a horrific day, you might end up in prison for the rest of your life. It's absurd. It's unjust. It's not rational.
Yeah.
It's absolutely wrong.
It's, I've been going back and forth on this a lot because I know, like, when we initially started talking, my initial reaction was the guy messed up bad, like bad to a point. And like, my anger was in the amount of people who are like, oh, he should walk, like accidents happen.
Yeah.
Okay. But there needs to be accountability. There needs to be again, I understand that training and everything has a lot to do with this. But again, if you're the operator of a vehicle, if I don't maintain my vehicle, my brakes fail, I hit and kill somebody. Now I understand the sentencing is different, but again, like, that's my fault. Okay. Like, I need to assume responsibility. And that was my initial issue, was the amount of people who are like, oh, he should just get a fine and he should be, no, this individual should never be able to drive a truck ever again. I don't care. In my opinion, you should lose your license for life. You should never be able to operate another semi truck like that again, because that is only opening up the door. Because who's to say that this individual doesn't get on with another company who doesn't do a lot with training, who maybe then this driver thinks it's acceptable to repeat these behaviors. And I think that you need to have a hard line in the sand with this. There has to be something. There has to be an accountability. I agree. The amount of people who are sitting out here and saying that his sentence should be, was it commune or something? Is that the one where it should just be eliminated, or like they should get rid of it?
So commutation would be you're still
Commutation.
responsible for what you've done,
Yeah.
but you're not going to serve any time in prison. You're going to
Okay.
just be kind of out there. I am against commutation. I think that's
Yeah.
inappropriate in this circumstance.
I agree. Now, should they be able to run Annie Layer? I got to give her a shout
She's
out.
on top of it. She's on
She's
top
on top
of
of
it.
all of this stuff right now.
We got a
Annie,
good question
thank you
from Chris Hammond from Great Dane too about owner operators.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Annie, thank you so much for providing that information for us, for everybody out there. Volt Power LLC, Active Authority. I hope I can't get sued. Can I get sued for putting their information out there? This is all public record, right?
I mean, we don't know that is the same one. The one that I have found is Volt
Okay.
Trucking LLC is
Volt
the one
Trucking.
there's an article I can send you that has more information
Okay.
about that new organization. That might
won't
not be
say-
the same one.
Yeah,
So let's just
I won't say that. I won't
let's-
say that information.
It could
Annie,
be. We
thank
don't
you
know.
so much. But I'm not looking to get sued here. But we'll just stick to the information that's out there. But yeah, I just think that again, this individual, like the amount of negligence on the driver's part is very absurd, and the driver needs to be held accountable. He does need to serve time for this.
And this is why I focus on saying you have to take the facts and the law and look at them in different lenses. The facts is that this driver committed a horrific crime. This is unimaginable. They've affected so many lives. I mean, 28 cars involved in the accident, tons of injuries, 4 deaths. That is tragic at a massive scale. But so few of us actually interact with the law. The law is this very strange, esoteric. You go there when you have to go through a divorce proceeding, or you're doing something with a probate court for some wills and estates. But when you touch the criminal justice system, so few of us understand how it works and why it is the way that it is. So this sentence is not because he's a very, very bad man.
Correct.
This sentence is because in 1990, the Colorado legislature wanted to be tough on crime. And tough on crime meant you would serve your sentence consecutively for certain crimes that were crimes of violence. And again, vehicular homicide, the worst part of what happened here is not a crime of violence under Colorado law. No. This is why people get to learn about law. That's why I like being an armchair attorney. I don't practice day to day, but I'm a fan of the business. I'm a fan of the way that it works.
And you can break it down and explain it in real terms. And, you know, and that's what's needed in this case, because again, it's, 110 years is outlandish to me. It's very, because yes, there are similar cases where, you know, but again, there's no direct parallel. There's no precedent that was set that has an identical way that they can formulate on the state level or the federal level. Like, hey, this is exactly what happened here, and this is why we are doing it. There are a lot of other cases out there that people are trying to draw in and say, oh, it's this. If the driver was that, this wouldn't be that's not the case. Yeah. It might be the case in other states, but not where it happened. And that is what is the most important detail, is where it happened, the jurisdiction of the law that it falls under in that area. What happens in your state is irrelevant in this situation. Mm-hmm. What is relevant is it happened in the state of Colorado based off of everything that we saw out there. And that is why it was held to the level that it was. So to get to Chris Hammond's question, owner operators in the future, there's been a lot of mergers and acquisitions the past few years. My dad was an owner operator. Is it different today for owner operators? My honest opinion is we are never going to get rid of that nomad style driver who wants to do their own thing, be their own boss. They don't want to listen. Okay, let me rephrase this. It's not that they don't want to listen to other people, but they want to do their own thing. They're an entrepreneur. They're a business owner. They want to answer themselves. They have their American dream, and they want to preserve their American dream. And I think that if anything, I think that cases like this in particular are going to make it harder for individuals.
Absolutely.
Because this is what it does to insurance and everything else that's out there. I think it's going to make it harder for that. And that's what I don't want to see. Like I said last week, and pretty much how I feel about everything. I want to preserve the American dream for these individuals who are risking not only their lives on a daily basis, because that's a big thing. They're like, oh, they're just a driver. No, no, no. This individual is out there risking their lives day in and day out, because there's a lot of shit that happens out on the open road that you don't. I've been in plenty of trucks in my life. I've ridden out there. The psychological effects of seeing a decapitated body on the side of the freeway is still with me to this day. I saw that when I was a child, Matt, and riding in the truck with my dad. There was a blue tarp. I remember it vividly, man. I remember it vividly. There was a blue tarp over the body, and my dad said, Chris, turn away. And I looked, and I'm like, how do you do with this? He's like, you become numb to it. But that is just a small percentage of what these drivers go through out there. And, not only on top of that, like this driver in particular in Colorado, the effects that driver is going to go through from a psychological standpoint for the rest of that individual's life. He will never live a normal life, ever. Mm-hmm. Never again will he live a normal life. And that is just a small peek into what these drivers go through on a daily basis. So we want to say that's not just a truck driver. That is a mother, that is a father, that is a brother, that is a wife, husband, however you want to spin it. That is a fucking person behind the wheel of that truck. And us as an industry need to take that into consideration here. And I'm not saying that there's not a lot of bad actors out there. I'm not saying that there's not people out there who kind of put a blind, whatever to that, because the same thing on the brokerage side. There's a lot of shitty brokers out there as well that nobody wants to talk about. But we need to look at this from an industry perspective. How will this shape the next 5 years? How many people now are not going to want to become a driver now because they see that? They're like, well, wait a second. If I make a mistake, I got to spend the rest of my life in prison. There's a big difference between intentional and unintentional, and that is where the line's blurred. I understand a lot of the old school drivers who are like, hey, the driver should have done A, B, C, and D here. But again, that driver didn't have 30 years on the road. It's just like, again, there's a lot of things that we need to change as an industry to make this. I don't know, man. I can go on and on about this. I'm starting to ramble, but
the thing I think about for owner operators is this was a business model that was designed to minimize risk for certain companies. So if you have an owner operator, you're able to say their maintenance isn't my problem. Their hours of service is not my problem. Their maintenance and fuel consumption, these are not my problems. These are their problems to worry about. Owner operators are business owners like anybody else, but they are facing enormous pressure. And there's very few in our entire supply chain that want to help them. They can't find bathrooms. They can't find parking. They can't find profitable loads. And because it's so fragmented, 90% of carriers are 6 trucks and fewer. The small carriers move America. Now, it's the big carriers that are also using owner operators in certain circumstances to take up the peaks and the valleys of their own business. But the whole business behind the owner operator model is, I don't want to deal with your benefits and your liability. That's why California passed AB 5. The whole purpose of that is for California to say, hey, trucking company that says these are independent contractors, I don't believe you. I think you're lying to me. And that is not, I'm not making a positive or negative about AB 5. I have a lot of thoughts about AB 5.
Yeah.
That could be a subsequent show.
That's another show.
That's another show. But what I hope this leads to is that we need to treat drivers better, and we need to focus on their being professionals, trained professionally. My goal, hope that I would see, is whatever truck driving schools are pumping out drivers that don't know how to use an engine brake, get out of the business. 100%. You shouldn't be in here. And we should bankrupt every single one of them.
That's what I want to see in this. I want to see that trucking company who's now since been reincarnated, who knows how many times, who knows how many MCs are operating under right now. Right. We don't know that. They need to be held liable. The truck, it's tough for me to say the truck driving school, because unless they have very detailed records, like, hey, this is what every driver's gone through, blah, 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 blah. Again, I think that, yeah, you're right. Because when you're going down a mountain grade, and if you're doing that in your vehicle right now and you're only using your brakes are going to overheat. Use your engine brake. That's why there's a downshift in your automatic vehicle. I don't know if anybody's ever told you that, but that's how you brake down a mountain. Use your engine brake. Your engine is literally built for this. There needs to be a higher emphasis on training. That is what I want to see, because these drivers, these people who want to go out and start their own company, they want to go out and risk it all, because that's what you're doing as an entrepreneur. You're literally risking it all every single day. we need better training in place. We need to do more as an industry to ensure that these individuals who have it all on the line are taken care of.
And the last thing I'd mention for my own purposes is for anybody who's watching this and you ever see an article about some type of law, some type of sentence, you're seeing it because someone wants you to see it. The media is designed to make you think very specific things about what you read. So I've talked to a lot of people online and said, oh, what's the value of 4 lives? How long should someone go to jail for? He's not in jail for 4 lives. That's not why he's in jail. He's in jail for what was considered crimes of violence in 1990 Colorado. These sentencing guidelines are not rational. They are done because they served a political purpose decades ago.
Yeah.
Fast forward to today, and I hope you learned a little bit about the law, and I hope people get excited about what you can learn when you take a moment and say, forget about the heat of the moment. Let's figure out what exactly is going on.
And then another thing to kind of, I know we got to wrap up here, but another thing is he wasn't charged with federal crimes. He was charged with state crimes. And there's a big difference between that. And again, it's like you said, the media is going to put out what they want you to read to keep you coming back. A lot of it is clickbait. It's not necessarily facts. I'm not going to go into my opinion on the media right now. But it's designed for something that doesn't tell the whole story. And I'm glad you put that out there. He's not serving time for the vehicular manslaughter.
Yeah.
And
his conviction, his sentence will be revised. I mean, everybody's watching this. Like the prosecutor said, we don't want this. This is too much. 4 million people have signed petitions to have something done. Something will be done. Justice will be served, and justice is served when people participate and learn about what these laws are. If Colorado becomes a thing that we focus on, every state that has these mandatory minimums or crimes of violence needs to be re-looked at and examined. Is this reasonable? Is this rational? Is it just?
And this is why, and to end this is why we need to preserve what we have here in the United States of America. So situations like this can happen. All right. It's not like it's closed book. This person's done. Their life is over. There's an appeals process. There's a system that we have here in the United States of America to protect us. And that is what we need to preserve in this instance. We can't give that up. We need to fight back when there are instances like the state of Colorado. The citizens of Colorado, and if you're in a state right now, you have an opportunity to fight back. You have an opportunity to push back and let your voice be heard. Let your voice be heard in these matters. If you don't agree with it, that's the beauty of the United States of America. You can say it, all right, and do something about it. Matt Leffler, thank you so much. Everybody who's been commenting, Annie Layer, I'm going to send me a DM. I want to talk to you more. You've been dropping a lot of knowledge in the comments here. I love that. Tony Darnell, thank you. John Radvansky, Chris Hammonds, everybody who's tuned into this. I appreciate you guys all so much. Thank you. Again, check out my friends over at BitFreighter, preferred EDI partner of the Freight Coach. Matt, close us out. What do you got to say there?
I'll put a copy of my notes for you, Chris. We can share this with the rest of the people. I love notes. I love research. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you very much. And happy holidays. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas to everybody out there. I appreciate you guys so much. And we'll be talking to you soon.